the 1980s, a cult of devil worshippers is bringing a demon being straight from hell. They are carrying this out at night in a remote wooded location. They have successfully kidnapped a healthy adult, which is required to summon a demon. Bill, an elderly soldier, owns the remote region where he is currently visiting his late wife's grave. He gives his wife a new rose and then notices a sound coming from somewhere. He looks at it and sees the devotees of the devil throwing their victim into the depths of hell. They continue to chant in an unknown tongue, which eventually creates a demon with a grayish hue. The demon is informed by Joshua, the group's leader, that he will be given strength and food by the worshippers of the devil, who will feed and tend to it. When the demon leaves, Joshua finds it hard to accept that the summoning was successful. A few days later, Joe, a new sheriff who is still getting used to the small town, is sent to Hope Valley. A mechanic called Rick approaches him and strikes up a conversation with him. Even though he is still getting used to it, Joe admits to Rick that he enjoys a peaceful town. The sheriff then walks inside the police station and questions his two colleagues about some recent events in the town. However, all they have to report to him is minor information, which Joe, a native of New York, finds strange. Even topics like rabies, vampires, and a movie that only the sheriff has seen are discussed. Teddy, one of the police officers, excuses himself from the force. Teddy has a crush on someone, Liz, the other police officer, informs the sheriff. The policeman then goes to a nearby club where he finds Deanna, a beautiful female bartender, dancing and cleaning. Teddy agrees when Deanna asks him if he'd like a coffee. After that, he describes the new sheriff in response to her question. He was quiet. Deanna assumes that the sheriff's loneliness is the reason of this since he is unfamiliar with anyone in the community. A local resident named Harry enters the building from this location. Harry explains to the policeman that some residents think the sheriff is frigid because he hasn't yet traveled the entire town. Teddy then departs with this in mind. Harry implores Deanna to already declare her love to the police officer as he leaves. When Teddy returns to the police station, Bill, an elderly veteran, has just arrived and is holding a shotgun. He has come to report several trespassers who have entered his property. The trespassers, according to Bill, are covered in sheets. They are joined by a man, and they have called forth what he calls a horrible monster, which enters the man's body. Naturally, Joe doesn't think the veteran is telling the truth and assumes he's just mistaken some youths partying on his land. Bill, who is new to the town, informs the sheriff that nobody ever approaches his land in the community, but the sheriff is unaware of this. Just then, Bernard, a dog owner, walks into the police station and inquires as to if anyone has seen his dog, Poncho. The dog owner and Bill argue over this since the veteran wants the dog to be on a leash. Bernard immediately departs after this. Joe notifies Bill of his will investigate his allegation, to which the veteran responds that he has already made the necessary preparations. The veteran also informs the police officers that they may not be able to communicate over the phone and must instead rely on radio communication. After the veteran departs, Liz remarks that the elderly man is genuinely unsettling and that he has recently been experiencing strange occurrences. The sheriff leaves to visit the nearest community radio station bearing this in mind. There, he queries Georgia, the radio host, as to whether she has heard anything odd on the airwaves. Responding that she hasn't heard anything, she also tells the sheriff to relax because not all communities are evil and states that not all towns are bad. Teddy is searching for Bernard's puppy while driving around in his police vehicle. He spots some blood on the road and an abandoned bicycle that appears to belong to the neighborhood paperboy, Timmy, while on the phone with Liz. The cloaked men that Bill is referring to can also be seen by Teddy. He briefly glances back, but the men have already vanished. Teddy finds this odd and promptly gets in his car and leaves. A couple is having an intimate moment inside their car when it starts to quake. The young man searches for the source of the problem. This roaring. A little while later, the young man comes again, but this time he is in a panic and begging with his girlfriend to open the car door. He is quickly dragged away by the gray demon, though. When she sees the monster wiping its bloody palm on the windscreen, his lover screams. After consuming flesh, the demon later develops horns that emerge from its head, showing that it has advanced. The veteran Bill runs into 3 cloaked men outside his home at the same moment. As he discusses their existence and ridiculous appearance with his deceased wife, he simply laughs at them. Bill is not afraid of the hooded men despite the fact that they are all carrying sharp weapons because he has served in the military. Bill directs them. One of the hooded guys is ordered to approach him, and when he does, he steps on a tripwire and an explosion occurs. Another explosion results from the attempt of a second hooded figure to approach from a different direction. Bill uses his grenades to dispatch the final hooded man when the man's foot gets caught in a bear trap that was strategically set close by. Joe is currently eating at the neighborhood eatery. When Mary, the diner's proprietor, inquires about his opinion of the fare, the sheriff responds that her burger is still the greatest. Cindy, the waitress, arrives just then, late, but Mary doesn't mind. Cindy does not appear to have yet met the new sheriff. The waitress queries Joe about his purpose for being in this tiny. When asked why he wants to leave New Yorkers behind, he replies that he just needs a change of scenery. Joe pays for the meal and leaves since he is done talking. However, just as he is about to leave, Liz, a police officer, enters the restaurant and quickly alerts the sheriff about loud noises coming from Bill's house. When the sheriff departs, the charmed Cindy tries to say farewell to him in a cute manner, but quickly regrets what she said. The sheriff ignores a man yelling his name because it is urgent. Bobby, the radio host's son, questions Rick the mechanic about the timing belt delivery after he has already left. When Rick calls for it on the phone, the line suddenly disconnects. They notice that apparently every call line in the entire town is dead as well. They also try Georgia's office's landline, but it is also unavailable. The sudden appearance of Georgia scares both Rick and her kid. The conversation continues across the unresponsive phone lines, and Georgia wonders if it is connected to the prior sheriff's investigation. They hear Joe's radio discussion with Teddy, who is coming back to town, when the radio announcer turns it on. Due to this, the 3 intrepid individuals approach the police officer and inquire as to what is actually occurring over the radio. Teddy informs them that he spots Timmy's bike next to a bloody area while searching for the missing dog. He desires to dial a phone number to Timmy's parents, but it is now impossible. The officer then assumes that this is related to the encounter with Bill because Liz and the sheriff are currently traveling there. At Bill's farm, Joe and Liz show there in the break. He observes a landmine on the ground and the veteran's bloody boots. Joe turns back to Liz after noticing his abandoned wheelchair that is slouched over. The horned devil, on the other hand, is standing behind the policewoman and quickly squeezes her miserable head. This gives Joe a small shock, but he swiftly fires his revolver at the demon. His fate is a mystery. Teddy makes every effort that evening to get in touch with his fellow police officers, but he never hears back. The residents of the village are holding out hope that Joe and Liz are merely discussing the explosions with the veteran. The sheriff is a sharp, cynical man who comes from the big city, so Rick the mechanic believes that there is actually a problem. Teddy remains optimistic that his fellow police officers will survive and return to duty. As a result, he will patrol and steady the town. In order to stop Bernard, the dog's owner, from looking for his pet, he will also check on him. In their own ways, others have also opted to assist. Rick has made the decision to visit Bill's farm and investigate what transpired. Georgia arrives at the radio station and scans the radio for anything unusual. Bobby will check on other town residents and inform them of the situation. However, the hooded men have also made a decision to move, so they are not the only ones who are doing so. Rick is then discovered by Teddy remaining in front of his vehicle. Both of them simultaneously inform the other that their automobile batteries are dead. Rick suggests that all of the nearby automobiles' batteries are likely dead. This indicates that someone opposes their departure from Hope Valley. They must wait for the phone lines to reopen because he doesn't have any extra batteries on hand. Teddy, of course, does not. Given all the strange things going on around them, they don't want to wait that long. Deanna runs into the hooded men while she is taking out the trash. She tries to ask them about their business with her despite not knowing who they are. She is startled as the hooded man in front of her pulls out a knife and declares his intentions, causing the woman to scream for assistance. When Teddy hears this, Rick is left in the dust as Teddy takes off. The policeman kills the hooded man who is ready to murder Deanna when he arrives. Teddy is attacked by another foe, who is able to take Teddy's gun away. However, Deanna returns with a shovel and attacks the enemy with it repeatedly, forcing the policeman to retreat. Halt her future advancement. But then other hooded men show up at the site. Harry steps in to save the two, asking them to leave it to him and to shut the door right away. Despite his good effort, the enemies quickly and easily dispatch the brave man. When Rick hears a sound outside his repair business, he has just finished looking for his rifle. The mechanic moves carefully outdoors to inspect and secure the area. He is abruptly attacked from behind by a hooded figure, but he is quickly killed by 2 gunshots. When another one suddenly appears behind him, forcing him to fire, he gently approaches the victim he had just slain. The next hooded figure is considerably taller. Rick chooses to utilize his trusty crowbar in place of the enemy, possibly seeking to engage in a man-to-man combat as his close-range weapon. However, as a second hooded figure emerges, Rick offers himself as a sacrifice by firing at the surrounding gas cans. The nearby residents of the nearby towns can hear the loud noise of the explosion, which is powerful enough to eliminate the adversaries. Teddy is resolved to return to the police station in order to carry out his responsibility to serve and protect because of this. Going back outside is practically a sure way to die, so Deanna and Bobby are understandably wary of the idea. The policeman, however, is insistent because it is only a short distance away and because more guns are kept inside. Teddy is given a baseball bat by Deanna so he can at least arm himself for his dangerous mission. Teddy has a baseball bat in his hand and says he'll talk to you on the radio when he gets back to the police station. Bobby observes someone leaving the smoke-filled repair shop, and it turns out to be Rick. Rick yells out Bernard's name after surviving the blast because he just so happens to live nearby. But the devil grabs him by the head and kills him as he is sluggishly making his way to Bernard's residence. A hooded man with an axe arrives behind the elderly woman in Mary's diner at the same time, and he quickly slashes her. Cindy shouts uncontrollably at the horrifying scene. She succeeds in escaping the adversary but trips and collapses. The hooded man moves closer. The fearful radio host Georgia saves the waitress by firing a shotgun at the opponent. Running to where Teddy and the others are staying, she hurriedly grabs Cindy in her arms. Georgia inquires about Rick as soon as she walks in, but Cindy responds that the mechanic has passed away. Georgia inquires as to what is happening and adds that she hears nothing on the radio, not even from the sheriff or Liz. The most they can do right now, she says, is to broadcast what is happening and hope that someone is driving close. Bobby suggests that they phone someone, but she declines. Teddy acknowledges that this is a long shot, but he agrees. Currently, Georgia is already horrified by what is taking place. Cindy, who claims to have witnessed an inhuman person snatch Rick away violently, is doubtful that the police officer can make it back to the police station without incident. They now understand that they are dealing with something supernatural and extraterrestrial. But the cop maintains that he must return to the police station since that is what he is supposed to do. He then requests Deanna to get her one-way radio so they can chat to each other on his walkie-talkie. Teddy is the only one who can talk to them on the one-way radio, therefore they are unable to answer to him. The policeman assures them all that they will live if he returns with the weapons and ammunition. But first, he can leave. The others start to check after Georgia notices something odd outside. They witness a hooded figure dragging his dead comrade into the woods. Bobby deduces that they are supplying food to something hidden by the trees. The unfazed policeman chooses to leave them alone by going to the store's back while they are all preoccupied. When Deanna notices that Teddy has left, it is already too late. Teddy carefully navigates the dark streets outside. He meets a hooded man carrying a crowbar right away. When another foe enters the fray, Teddy finds himself outnumbered in the ensuing melee. The opponents are still too much for the policeman, despite the fact that he is able to hold them off for a while. Same as. He is about to be hit by a baseball bat when Joe, who has just arrived with his face completely covered in blood, steps in to save him. The sheriff, holding a shotgun, commands Teddy to enter the police building right away. They enter and use a table to block the door to keep people out. Teddy is unable to contain his amazement at Joe's remarkable survival. Joe nods his head in silence when the sheriff inquires about Liz's whereabouts, indicating that she has passed away. Joe responds that a man-eating demon has been sent forth from the depths of hell when the man asks him what is going on in the town. Teddy then asks again, has Joe seen the demon? How did he escape from the hideous being? It turned out that Joe had blown the demon with Bill's claymore mine. As soon as Teddy hears this, he is reminded that the evidence locker contains an explosive device. It has been there ever since Bill's possession was stolen by the previous sheriff, Joe, last year. Joe, who is speechless by what he sees, is instructed to open the evidence locker. When Joe discovers there are still some survivors, he orders Teddy to make sure they are safe. Teddy will achieve this by luring the hooded guys out of the area, and Joe will blow up the bomb on the monster. Teddy informs Deanna and the others that Joe is still alive via this directive. Bobby is stabbed as he instructs them to ready the entrance for their arrival. By the opponents through the door's little gap. The three women hastily lay down the hurt Bobby on the pool table after he shouts out for assistance. Georgia is consoling his hurt kid as Cindy and Deanna apply the bandage to Bobby's wound to stem the bleeding. Nevertheless, Bobby still perishes from his wound in spite of their combined efforts. Teddy, meantime, has returned to the streets to battle the hooded guys. The policeman is still shot by the enemies despite carrying a shotgun and a revolver. Fortunately, he is right outside the shop's entrance, and Georgia and other people let him in. He learns there that Bobby passed away just a short while ago. Despite the fact that no one is to blame, Teddy attempts to express regret for what occurred. Then, he recalls that Joe is still present. Joe uses a gun with exploding bullets to launch an explosive attack against the hooded men outside. He then engages in combat with an enemy holding a sledgehammer. Due to his adrenaline rush, the sheriff is able to take down his hooded opponent. He picks up his gun once more and fires another explosive cartridge at the target. He sees a chainsaw on the ground and puts it back down. The sheriff approaches Bernard's tree garden cautiously now that he is carrying a chainsaw. Joe slides through the trees like a cat and mouse game in an effort to strike the horned demon. After some cutting, the monster has finally made up its mind to emerge. As a result, Joe takes a step back to grab the rifle before firing it at the creature, setting off a massive explosion. Deanna, Cindy, and Teddy emerge from hiding when the smoke has cleared to inquire as to whether the demon has indeed been vanquished. The others concur when Joe suggests that they move on to the following town when the monster's demise has been established. Joe jokes about asking whether they may ride the metro as they slowly make their way there. After that, a man is eating while listening to the radio about what occurred to Hope Valley in another town called Ingram. The waitress remarks that it seems like there are a lot of activities going on in the surrounding town, but the man responds that nobody seems to care. For tiny villages like theirs. The waitress then turns her attention to another customer. Joshua, the head of the devil worshippers, turns out to be the customer and is now searching for another community to terrorize. And the movie ends here. If you like this movie, please leave a comment and like and subscribe.